Hello, everyone. I'm Erik D'Souza, and today we are starting a series to celebrate the shortlist nominees of the Crime Writers of Canada's Award of Excellence. Today, joining me is Alice Bienia, whose novel Three Dog Night was nominated for the Whodunit Award for Best Traditional Mystery. Welcome, Alice.
Hi,
Um,
Eric. Here.
so let's start with the quick bio. A former geologist and management consultant, Alice was a trailblazer for Canadian women conducting field exploration. Her work in remote regions of Canada honed her passion for adventure, coffee, reading, and storytelling. Oh, and all things absurd and sublime. Alice resides in Calgary, and when not plotting murder, amuses herself watching foreign flicks and exploring Calgary's urban parks and pathways. Now, there's a lot there in that bio, so I'm interested to see how much of your background finds its way into your story. So let's start with um, well, basically, I've interviewed many people. Often authors are retired teachers or police officers or lawyers. But Alice, I think you're my first geologist. So does that background influence your storytelling?
Yeah, Eric, I believe it does. Like you, I do know authors who have had former careers as police officers or, uh, doctors or lawyers, and they've gone on now to write police procedurals or legal or medical thrillers. Um, but geology is a little different, and so when I first started writing, I briefly did consider making my protagonist a geologist and who discovers crimes, being committed in the course of her work. Or alternatively, I thought maybe I could set the mysteries in a mining town or some town where there's a lot of controversy around whatever energy form is being developed there. Um, but I considered that option for about 5 seconds and then discarded it. I thought it would be somewhat limiting for my protagonist. And then also with a long career in that sector, I really didn't think that I wanted my protagonist to sort of follow in that same vein. But there is this old adage that says, write what you know. And so the more I thought about it, the more I realized there's actually a lot of aspects of my former career that would be very relevant to the kinds of experiences my protagonist as a new PI was going through. So as you mentioned in my bio, I started my career as an exploration geologist in the mineral sector. So this was not a desk job. And so every day was different. I got to work with people from all over Canada and all walks of life. And the remoteness of the areas I worked in, as well as the challenges of these that each new exploration program brought, were essentially unscripted. And so, literally, I found myself in new territory. And so, for Jorja, my protagonist, that's also true. It's not a desk job being a PI, not for her anyway. Every case is different. Every case puts her into a new situation with new people from different walks of life. And each case brings unscripted challenges, right? So there was a lot of familiarity there. And I do believe that one's personal background, what an experience, whatever that is, can help an author, when they're developing dialogue or setting or developing characters. But I have been able to utilize certain moments and certain experiences from my life as a geologist in my stories. So for example, in Three Dog Night, Jorja travels to BC and she's looking for this man who might have some answers to the question she has when she's investigating this murder. And this man's a recluse and he lives off the grid. So there's a scene where George is making her way up the hill along a narrow cut line, through a forest, through a dense forest, and she's all alone. There's no one around for miles, and her physical exhaustion is evident, as she climbs. The snow is hampering each one of her steps, and her mind starts to play games with her. And I've been there. Maybe not the exact same spot that's described in the book, but one of dozens just like it, where I found myself alone in the middle of nowhere. And after a while, the fear kicks in, and every sound around me registers as a potential threat, right? And you're constantly reminded that if anything were to happen out there, there's no one to help, and that you're truly on your own. So I can bring sort of those experiences and things, and small sort of vignettes into my career, into my writing, occasionally, just the same way I guess, police officers or other professions do as well.
I wonder if, those years ago when you were hiking and all alone and feeling those fears, if you thought to yourself, one day this is going to make a great book.
Yeah. No, it never occurred to me, Erik. Usually what was going through my mind is, when am I going to get out of here? And is that really a bear over there, that shape that's moving?
Um, so Three Dog Night is your third novel with this lead protagonist, Jorja Knight. Uh,
Yeah.
when writing a series, it's often very challenging, or one of the challenges that writers face is to keep our main heroes stimulating. So what keeps Jorja Knight appealing and interesting?
Yeah. So, I think I'm now giving Jorja sort of more complex cases, as she's becoming a more experienced PI. And also, I think there's, her own personal life and background will, also help to keep her story interesting. So in Night Blind, which was the first book in the series, Jorja's a relative newbie, and she makes, a few mistakes, and but she's also exposed to situations and people and that she never had to deal with before, in her former career as a forensic lab analyst. She's used to working in sort of a clean, rather sterile, environment in this lab. So she finds out in that first book that, working in the field is messy. It involves people. It involves emotions. These are the things that, she has not been really familiar with working in, as a lab analyst, and something she's not used to. So, she begins to also understand that, being a PI is somewhat physically taxing, or can be. And also that, people don't always tell you the truth. It's got kind of a different environment than working in the lab, So, by the time we see her in Three Dog Night, she has almost 2 years of experience, so her confidence and skills as a PI are growing. And although George is a smart, intelligent woman, she's not perfect either. And she has a personal life, she has a past. Both her parents are dead. She's estranged from her brother. And she still harbors a lot of guilt about her mother's death. And she only knows sort of the bare basics of what happened the day her mother died. And so one day she might want to close that chapter in her own personal story. And then also, I've given her a love interest starting in about book 3. And I say love interest, but he's also kind of her nemesis, Detective Inspector Azagora. And I describe him as, he's hotter than molten lava. But he's all cop, and he's got this typical cop's disdain for private investigators. And Georgia's had terrible luck with men, and might be because she's a little too independent for some men's taste, and maybe she's a little too independent for her own good. So as the series evolves, we'll see if she can break down those prejudices and barriers with Inspector Azagora, or whether that relationship is doomed to fail. So my hope for the series and for Jorja is that I'm going to be giving her more complex cases. She's learning new skills, and she's going through things in her personal life. And I hope that's what keeps the series fresh and interesting for both me and for the readers.
Excellent. So your series is set in Calgary, your hometown, but often, not always, but often, traditional whodunits are set in small towns. Why did you choose to make Calgary the setting for your novel?
Yeah. Well, we all know that bad things can happen in small towns, and some small towns, at least as evidenced in some of the fiction books I have read, seem to have sort of an unhealthy number of murders. So, but I chose Calgary for a couple of reasons. I like the size of Calgary for my story. We've got almost 1.2 million people. it's big enough that you know you can get lost in the city, but small enough to offer those moments of much needed familiarity. And there's also sort of a diversity in the demographics and the social economics conditions. There's different business sectors and interests, and unfortunately, there's also enough organized crime to offer up some interesting opportunities for Jorja and the type of cases she's going to be involved in. But having said that, I think a second reason, goes back to this old adage of write what you know. And when I was first starting to write, I was on such a steep learning curve, having to learn, not only the craft, but, how to publish, how to market, everything that goes along with writing and publishing your own book, that setting the series in Calgary, my own hometown, was a way to take away from some of the steepness of the learning curve that I was in at the time. Yeah.
Kind of cliche a little bit to a certain degree, but there's nothing more Canadian than a snowstorm. And there's a storm brewing on the cover of your book. And actually, I have it here. I hope everyone can see it. Or I had it here. I'll bring it up as you're speaking. But I was wondering how much or how important is this snowstorm coming up in your story?
Yeah, well, you're right about nothing more Canadian than spring snowstorms, and we're feeling that again this spring. Yeah, so Three Dog Night takes place sort of in early March to late spring time frame, and so there's a series of sort of these late winter, early spring storms hammering the foothills, and they become just another obstacle for Jorja to deal with, as she tries to solve the murder of this high-powered tech guru who was killed in his highly secured home. So yeah, the storms do play a part. The idea for the book title, Three Dog Night, actually came from one scene in the book where Jorja is really struggling to survive a particularly brutal night when she finds herself out in the wilderness. And the phrase Three Dog Night is said to have been used, by Northerners, back in the day, as sort of a way to gauge the temperature. And so if one had to huddle in one's tent at night with three of your sled dogs, then it was a very cold night indeed. And so that was the sort of the behind the reason for titling the book that way.
That's an excellent title. Learn something new.
Yeah.
Before I let you go, I did want to plug very quickly your website and newsletter. I was visiting it earlier, and I know we said you had 3 novels, but if you go to your website and join your newsletter, you'll send everybody a copy of a prequel.
That's
I guess, is that a good way to meet Jorja Knight through this prequel, or could you just jump right in?
Yeah, no, it is a good way. It basically shares the story of how she became a private investigator. So it starts, the first of the book starts with her working as a forensic analyst, and of course there's a mass shooting, at her former place of work, and so that's sort of the impetus for her to realize that she's been living her life a little too safely, a little too sheltered, and also working in a lab that, the work has become sort of staid and boring and same old. And so, that's the impetus for her jumping ship and becoming a PI. And yeah, it's her first, her first real case, although I don't think she was paid very much for that case, because she's actually hired by a friend of a friend. So yeah.
Excellent. Well, it was very nice meeting you, Alice. I think we're going to talk again soon when we start talking about your contribution to the Anthology for Crime Writers Canada, but that'll be another day. Also, thank you for agreeing to be my first guest for this series. It's always a little nerve-wracking doing this thing first. Now I get to use you as an example to everyone else.
Awesome.
And I will include your website into the comments for both Facebook and YouTube. And good luck on May 26th.
Yeah. Well, great. Thank you very much, Erik. Thanks for the interview and for plugging my website. And it was a real pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much. And thank you, everyone. Have a good day.